don't know. Narrow is the way. This evening, we're going to continue our study over the life of Christ. I apologize for my voice. I am just a hair bit congested, so bear with me as I sound like Josh Turner up here. We're gonna flip over to Mark 10 this evening, and we're going to continue what we've been studying. We're nearing the end of the physical life of Christ, as we've been going through this course for about a year now. But some of the things that we've kind of just touched on to set the scene, we're essentially in the last 2 weeks of his life. So everything that kind of happens from here on out, especially as we cover tonight, he's heading towards Jerusalem. He's going towards that final and big entry. So everything that's kind of taking place right now, you have to kind of remind yourself, like, oh yeah, in 10 days, 12 days, whatever it may be, he's going to be on the cross. He's going to raise from the grave, and so kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. What we talked about the last class was at the beginning of Mark 10. We talked a lot about marriage and divorce. And how that should be a common bond, how that should be something that two could come together with. And I remember the comment that divorce should not really be a word that we use. It really shouldn't be a word that's even in our vocabulary for a Christian, because divorce is never going to be the answer. It never should be the answer if we're both living Christian lives. Now, obviously, there's going to be some scenarios where maybe one is not going to be faithful or this, that, or the other. But at all possible, it should be a marriage. And as we can see in Malachi, the book of Malachi, marriage should be in order to raise godly offspring. And so that should always be our aim, and we should look to have a oneness, and we should remember that divorce is never going to be the answer that God would desire, that God would want, and we talked about that. We also talked about Jesus blessing the little children down there, and starting in verse 13 of Mark 10. And I remember making a comment last week about if we all just had a childlike mindset sometimes. I do remember saying last week that sometimes we adults can just zap the fun out of a lot of things in the world. We can make things not very fun. I remember bringing up or using Mark as an example. Whenever he used to lead VBS here, and he'd have he would on a Sunday morning worship, he would let the kids all come up front, like kind of on the front pew up there, and they'd all sing like "Jesus Loves Me," and those kids would be singing. I mean, knock the lights out of the ceiling up here. But when we adults sing it, we're just kind of like slashed over a little bit. We're not really singing it very enthusiastic. And the childlike heart, the innocence that they have, the kind of just the appreciation they have. A child is so dependent on their mother. An infant needs everything from their parents. And that's kind of the way we should be looking at Christ and that relationship with him. Tonight, though, we're going to flip over just a little bit further, because we're kind of we're going to stay in order of kind of what happens. But we're going to be over in Mark 10, starting in verse 32. And once again, Jesus is going to predict his death and his resurrection. And his apostles are not going to understand once again what all is going on. But it says this starting in Mark 10, starting in verse 32. Now they were on the road going up to Jerusalem. So again, he's heading this way. Now a lot's going to take place before he ever gets there, but he's heading this way. He's been heading this way for a while. So they're on their way going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them. Now, why would Jesus be going before them? Why would the people not be right there with them? Can anybody remember maybe what's taking place in some of these towns? Is Jesus welcomed with open arms? Now, they've tried to stone him. They've tried to run him out of town. They're always trying to arrest him. They're always trying to kill him. So Jesus is going before them, kind of leading the way. Some people are maybe standing a little bit further back, and they were amazed. One reason they could be amazed is simply because Jesus is going back into a place where he knows that persecution is going to take place. They know that they've always been trying to get after him, and so are they amazed because of that? Are they amazed just because of the way that Jesus is carrying himself? There could be numerous answers. And as they followed, they were afraid. Then he took the 12 aside again and began to tell them the things that would happen to him. Now, notice he only takes the 12. You have to think here, starting in Acts 1, thereafter Christ has gone up and been seated at the right hand. The 12 are going to be the ones that are going to have the Spirit fall upon them there at the beginning of Acts. And you can start to see some of the set up there at the end of Luke as well. And then the tongue, or they're going to be able to speak in each nationality, each language. They're going to be able to speak in different tongues and different languages so everyone can hear the message. And you're going to have a whole bunch of people respond to the invitation. And so he's giving them this information. So he takes the 12 aside. In verse 33, he says, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priest and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and scourge him and spit on him and kill him. And the third day he will rise again." Now, does anyone remember what happened the last time, or one of the last times Jesus predicted his death? Did anybody maybe stand up and said, "Not a chance"? Who was it? It's the one that always speaks out. Peter. I feel like Peter and me we speak before we think sometimes. Peter's gun ho. Peter's like, absolutely not. No chance. That's what I said before. But here, Jesus is saying, we're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man, which he gives himself this name, the Son of Man, will be betrayed by the chief priest and the scribes. Now, he's going to be before countless people. He's going to have the chief priest there. There's, of course, going to be scribes. There's going to be Pharisees. There's going to be just hosts of people, and they're going to chant Barabbas, Barabbas. They're going to do all these different things to him and list out the things that he's going to do here is what he says. They're going to condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. Now, are they going to condemn him to death over anything that actually is worthy of death? No, not at all. We're really going to find nothing, and we'll get there. But eventually, the chief priests are actually like, let me wash my hands of this. Deliver them to the Gentiles, and they will mock him. Anyone remember any of the things they said to him, whether it be on the cross or somewhere else? Any of the words they used to mock him? Anybody remember anything?
Saved others, but he can't save himself.
Saved others, but can't save himself. Why can't he come down off that cross? They hit him with the reed. They say, which one? They basically asked him, which one hit you? If you're so wise and so smart. There's a lot of things that they just mock and they laugh at. And what's funny is they just kind of sit there and mock him that he's some king. Well, he is a king. It's not the king you're looking for. And the king that he is far greater than any king that you think he might be because of your misinterpretation of the Old Testament. And so they mock him. They scourge him. Did they ever? We can go into that whenever we get closer to that actual scene. But the scourging process, what they did to him was excruciating. Absolutely excruciating. And then the fact that he had to still go to the cross after that is a whole other thing. They spit on him. Could you imagine hearing your own language spoken to you at the beginning of Acts? And you're one of the people that spit upon Jesus? I don't know if that person was there or not. It could have been. Could not have been. Can you imagine being one of the people that scourged him? Imagine being one of the people that mocked him. And there you are, in that scene that we get counted for us at the beginning of Acts. Cut to the heart. Could you imagine? They spit on him and kill him. On the third day, he will rise again. When you look at, let's see if I can find it real fast. Why? When you look at the account in Matthew, they actually do not understand what is going on when it comes to the account of Matthew, and we're given that information. But in Matthew, they don't understand what exactly is going on. They're missing the point, and they're not seeing it for what it is. Now, why might they be missing the point that Jesus is going to be delivered up? Who might they still be looking for, or who they think Jesus might still be? Okay, a prophet. What else might they still be misunderstanding?
They're looking for him to set up a physical kingdom in Jerusalem.
Yeah, they're still looking for a physical kingdom. And so if you think about it, we're going to see this in the next part, but if you think about it, they're probably really not giving much thought to it at all. It's just kind of just going straight over their head because they're like, this guy's here to set up an actual kingdom. Why would he be delivered over to the Gentiles for death? Why would anyone? Well, they're going to mock him. Why would they scourge him? Why would they spit on him? Why would they kill him? This is our king. He's going to set up an earthly kingdom. No one's going to do this. Well, we put that account told to us in Matthew. where they're not understanding. It was not revealed to them. And it's not really going to be revealed to them until you get to the very beginning part of Acts. You can start to see a little bit of it at the end of Luke. But they're still not fully understanding. Even when Mary and them make it to the tomb and they run back, there's still some disbelief as to, well, surely not. And they're forgetting what he's saying right here. And the third day he will rise again. We're still missing that point. Even at that point, his brothers don't believe in him until very, very late. I mean, there's a lot of still misinformation or some misguided truth still going on in this that Jesus is still working out of them. And so we're still missing this point. But once again, Jesus gives us a very detailed account of exactly what's going to happen. And if you think about this, if Jesus says all these things, do all these things come true within the next 2 weeks? Yeah, absolutely. Are they going to arrest him and condemn him to death? Yeah. Is he going to be handed over? Yeah. Are they going to mock him? Sure not. Are they going to scourge him? Yeah, every bit of it. Terrible. Are they going to spit on him? Yeah, we have that account. Maybe hit him with the reed. Are they going to kill him? Yeah, they're going to put him on a cross. Does he rise on the third day? He sure does. It's almost like he knows what's about to take place. It's almost like he might just be the King of Kings and the Son of Man. It might also be that, right? And so you can start to see Jesus predicting this, and these predictions are all going to come true as we see this. And once again, you would think that the apostles would think back to moments like this quickly, more quickly than they do. But it takes them a while, and I think it's unfair for us just to assume they would think of it. There's a lot going on in these final 2 weeks, and so I think we as well would probably struggle to remember back all of these things. We might like to think that we would instantly believe, but we would probably be a lot in their shoes as well. As we continue on, we have this section with the sons of Zebedee, which might actually be a great teaching for tonight, as people receive gifts that they love so much, or gifts that they instantly see, and they decide that they want to re-gift to somebody else because they don't like them. And so they're going to, I see some people looking at each other. There might be a couple that were giving out this morning. I loved all of mine. I don't know if this is a Christmas gift or not, but we do have a black cat named Jaws. It looks just like him. So a little too skinny. He's like 20 pounds, but good guy. So if we read this right here, we got James and John. So it says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him saying, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? And his mom is their mother is also involved in this too. We can see from other accounts. They said to him, grant us that we may sit one on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory. Now, when you read this first little section, what do you think they're probably thinking about? Do they understand what that question even means? Boy, are they misunderstanding. Yeah, so when you get to heaven, is that what they're thinking? No. When you we're going to establish a kingdom right now. So when you get there, do you care if we sit on the right and the left? They're not even thinking about what this question even means and how just realistically, I guess you could even say arrogant it would sound to the Father in all grand scheme of things. You know, they're thinking about this from a worldly sense. We wouldn't have the best seat there. Now, if you go back maybe 40 days in his life or so, maybe more than that, you might have to get close to 4 months. Jesus has taught about this. Jesus taught about this exact same thing. You are to be a servant. You are not to put yourself first. You are not supposed to sit in the highest seat if that seat is not for you. And so you're supposed to put others before yourself. And so here they are. Grant us that we may sit one on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory. So obviously they're thinking of a physical kingdom and not a spiritual one. But Jesus said to them, you do not know what you ask, which you could circle, highlight, underline. Boy, they're not understanding it. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They said to him, we are able. And I'm going to stop right there for a moment. I guess they are going to be able. Boy, are they missing the point of what he's saying right here. What is Jesus about to go through in the next 2 weeks? What's his cup the next 2 weeks? It's terrible. It's brutal. What's his what could you say his baptism or his immersion is going to be in the next 2 weeks? Persecution, death on a cross. He's not going in water. He's getting immersed in brutality. He's getting immersed in mocking and scourging. They're going to kill him. They're going to stuff him in a tomb and put a stone in front of him. That's his cup. That's what he's getting immersed in. And they said, we are able, which they are going to taste this. So Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink the cup that I drink. And with the baptism I am baptized with, you will be baptized. So are they going to experience these things? Are the apostles going to face persecution? Absolutely. Is the early church going to face persecution? Absolutely. We talked about this. I think Dale maybe has mentioned it in Hebrew. I know I've mentioned it in this class. The early church celebrated martyrs. Celebrated it. Now, not in like a weird sense, like, hey, another one died. That's not how they did it. But like, if someone were to keep their faith all the way to the point of death and said, we're killing you unless you forsake Christ. And they said, absolutely not, I'll never do it. They kill them. They'd be like, that person's faith should bring all of us encouragement. And I always bring up the point, are we going to do that in America one day? I'm not sure we're the least bit right. There's other countries right now where they would literally just behead you if you don't accept another religion. Is your faith that strong? Because for a Christian, you can behead us, you can burn us, you do whatever you want. Our reward is not earth, our reward is heaven. So you're just getting me one step closer to it. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be like the first one in the line to, like go hop in there. But at the same time, we ought to have the faith that these early Christians had, the faith that these apostles are going to have as they start to face persecution. The persecution they faced did not discourage them, oddly enough. It encouraged them. When you look at Saul, he persecuted the church, and he was going to persecute, going to kill, going to arrest, all these different things. And what did the folks there do? What did the believers there do? They took the word and they went. Saul's persecution caused Christianity, caused the gospel to start spreading. And then what happened to Saul? Then God said, now I'm going to use you to spread it even more. And so the persecution ought to strengthen us. We ought to have more faith from that. We ought to be encouraging one another as we face different persecutions. But in America today, the most persecution most of us are going to face is someone unfriending us on Facebook, leaving a bad comment somewhere, not letting us on like some TV program, or not being friends with us anymore. There's not a lot of like severe persecution like they were facing. They were facing being burned alive, for example, like in Nero's garden. They were facing extreme persecution, hung upside down. You can read all kinds of different things about how maybe some of these early apostles were murdered. There's a lot that could go on there. And so he says, you will indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the baptism I am baptized with, you will be baptized. You're going to feel these things. You're going to have these things. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared. Who's sitting at the right hand? It ain't one of the sons of Zebedee, is it? No. Who's going to be at the right hand of the Father? It's going to be Jesus at the right hand of the Father. And so he's pointing them once again towards a spiritual thing, and they're still thinking of something physical. He said, this is not mine to appoint. Whose decision is that for it to be appointed? It's the Father's decision. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be greatly displeased with James and John. Could you imagine? It's almost like they're trying to put themselves above the other 10, right? You could only imagine how displeased they would be. Now, why would they be displeased? Are they displeased because James and John are trying to get ahead of them? Or what else might be maybe bothering them in the back of their head? I wish I'd have thought of that question faster. Don't you think some of them are like, I wish I would have thought of that question faster? It could be a reason. They could be displeased because James and John are being selfish. They could be displeased because they themselves also want to be selfish and have that seat. But regardless, Jesus is again going to give us a teaching about not having this mindset. So it says, but Jesus called them to himself and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Jesus' response here is something that I feel like maybe too many people in the world have forgotten today, especially the last verse. But as you look at this, and we'll get to that last verse here in a second, those who are considered rulers today, do they use that power a lot? I mean, you can look at our political system. Do they use their power wrongly sometimes? Yeah, they sure do. Do people in authoritative positions use their power to lord over people sometimes? Yeah, and they can maybe consider themselves one of the great ones who exercise authority over people, and they have servants for them. People do all what they need. Jesus says there in verse 43, "Yet it shall not be so among you." He said, that's not how you get power. That's not how you get authority. That's not how you get all the riches. That's not how this works. But whoever desires to become great among you shall be what? Shall be your servant. So what does that mean about our lifestyle? What does that mean about how the way that we approach life? What should we be? A servant. We should have a servant mentality. Does that contradict what James and John just asked? Were they trying to put themselves in a higher position? They weren't thinking of the servant route. He says, "It shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all." Do a lot of people, or a handful of people, whatever we want to say, in the world today desire to be first? Well, it's a shame when you start running the wrong race. It's a shame when you're trying to finish this other race and you're trying to put other people behind you so that you can finish it first, but it's not even the right race you're trying to run. What's different between the world's race and a Christian's race is that in the world's race, you'll try to talk in the enemy's ear to get them to kind of think twice about if they're actually good enough for that race. You might cheat to get ahead of them. Maybe you're a little bit more vicious. Maybe you trip them. You put something in front of them so you can cause them to stumble. That way you can get another step ahead of them. Maybe you accuse them of cheating themselves. Like, oh, they're taking some drug that makes them faster or stronger to push them further down. That's the race of the world. The race of a Christian doesn't do that. The race of a Christian says, oh, you're here? If we're together, we can run this race stronger. If we're more banded together, come on, you can keep doing this. Right? In the world's race, they don't say, come on, you can keep doing this. They say, you might as well go ahead and stop. You ain't going to win this. I'm winning it. A Christian's race ought to be the complete opposite. It ought to be, come on, brother or sister, let's go. We're going to make this together. We're going to do this together. We're going to inherit heaven together. We should be encouraging one another. We should be taking the servant line. And we should not be a slave to the sins of this world, but we can be, in a sense, a slave to Christ because we're following after his example. We're following after his commandments, after what he is desiring for us. And in verse 45 here, it gives us probably one of the most powerful, I would say, verses that we are going to look at tonight. But it says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." Well, Jesus left something a lot greater than Sevier County, Tennessee. Jesus left something a lot greater than Dollywood, or whatever your favorite thing is to go do in this world. He left something a lot greater than that. He left perfection. He left heaven. He left all one could ever desire. And he didn't come to be what? To be served. You mean to tell me our King doesn't want to be served like that? He's not looking for that? Our King did what? I like to always say this. You never want to have a boss in a job you have. You want to have a leader. The boss just tells you what to do, but will never dare do it. A leader will ask you to do something and then might even do it with you or has already done it before. They're learning by example. Christ here, he says, I didn't come to be served. I came what? But to serve. I didn't come down here to be served by you all. I came to serve you all. I came to give you all something that can help you obtain something so much greater, help you obtain or be an overcomer of this world. And the very end is the key. And to give his life a ransom for how much? Just the Pharisees and the Sadducees, or the rich ones, or the ones that got to sit on each hand? That was for many. It doesn't give us an exact number. Dale talked about that maybe a few weeks ago, that some people think it's an exact number. for many. It wasn't just for the people of this time. It wasn't for the people afterwards. It wasn't people that are going to be alive when he makes his return again, whenever that could be. It's for many. And the cross goes back, it goes forward. It's not just something stationary. Is what he's going to give his life for? Is that going to help say Moses or Abraham? Abraham was working towards this. Abraham was commanded, or not commanded. He had a covenant with these things. He was looking forward to this. Jesus has talked about this before. Jesus' life being a ransom for many. His blood is very, 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 very powerful in cleansing for us. Questions, comments? Anything? Quietness? Okay, we got one.
I think about what's going to come in shortly when they're gathered around that last night, and he washes their feet. Right? If he can be a servant, right? And he's the one who ought to be served more than anybody else. But if he can be a servant to us, then why should we think, well, I'm above that, or
Yep.
I'm not going to stoop to do something to serve someone else?
Yeah, when you think about washing the feet, it is so much different than ours today. Our feet might stink a little bit because, we sweat a little bit in our socks or whatnot, or maybe we've got stinky feet. Why'd they wash feet back in this time?
Sandals, that's a lot of dirt.
Sandals, you got sand, you got dirt, you got who knows what you're walking through. They ain't clean. Like, they don't just stink, they're also dirty. And so Jesus, well, we'll get to that, but it's a beautiful point that Dale brings up. Jesus isn't above that. Jesus doesn't say, well, I made the dirt. I made the sand that you walk through. I made the things that you made the sandals with. I made mankind. I'm not going to clean that. He says, come here. I got you. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to do this because what? I came to serve. Yet today, we can act all high and mighty like we're too good for something. Like we're too good for that. We talked about that, I think it was 2 weeks ago. But sometimes we discredit people because of the way they dress, the tattoos they have, the lack of money they have, whatever it may be. We say, they'll never come to Christ. They may be doing so much more work in the kingdom than we are. Just because they got a whole slew of tattoos back in their 20s when they were out living like a crazy person, but they came to Christ in their, say, 30, and now they're out there doing Bible studies with people, reaching out to the lost. The example they could be. We tell ourselves so many stories about what people are based off how they present themselves, but we don't know their story. We don't know the way, why they're acting the way that they are. We're called to be a servant. Now, there's wisdom in that servanthood, but we're called to be a servant. We don't need to be acting high and mighty because our Savior was not high and mighty. And if anyone could act high and mighty and better than everyone else around them, it would have been the guy that made the world. It would have been the guy that could have called the angels down. It would have been the guy that can see the future, knows all of the past, and knows how many stars in the sky, hairs in your head. It's probably that guy that could be all high and mighty, but he's not. So why should we be? Why should we be? I don't have anything to brag on. I didn't hang the moon. I didn't think anything that cool. But he did, and if he's not bragging, then I don't have a right to brag. That's a good comment. Anything else? All right, this cat sweater's sweating me up here. I'll tell you what, it is hot. All right, we're going to continue on. Jesus heals a blind man real quick, and this will be our last thing of the night. Keep in mind, though, that the things that are taking place right here, again, Jesus is in his final couple weeks here. And so this question that James and John just asked, it's in his final couple weeks. When predicting for a third time his death and resurrection, it's happening within just a couple weeks. So here it says, now they came to Jericho. As he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude. Now, why would there be a great multitude with him at this point? Where is everyone kind of migrating towards right now? Jerusalem. What's about to happen? What's coming up? Passover's coming up. So there's going to be a great multitude going towards Passover. There's going to be a multitude following him. And we've seen this in different parts of his life as we study a bit. There's going to be multitudes because of his teachings. There are going to be multitudes because of his healings. There's going to be multitudes because people are going to be in the multitude trying to trip him up or accuse him of this, that, or the other, or they're wanting, some kind of handout or whatever. But it's going to say, with his disciples and the great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Now, if you look at some of the other accounts, we get the account of two people being at this scene. Mark here gives us one, and he actually names the person. Was that because he was more well known? It's probably likely. Maybe this blind person was more known than the other. But here we have the story of there being a blind beggar, and he cries out to Jesus. He knows Jesus is coming. He says, "Have mercy on me." And look at the name that he gives him, son of David. He's putting him in the right place. Have mercy on me. Do we find that out in our life today? Well, I'm not sure we always do enough, do we? We ought to be thinking more about how much mercy the Father has given to us. In verse 48, it says, I love this. Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more. Does the world warn us to be quiet all the time? Do other people try to warn us to be quiet all the time? Hey, they're not going to listen. I've tried. My favorite one. We've done that before. We've tried that before. It's all about, hey, just keep it down. We're just going to kind of keep it as what? Status quo. We've always done it this way. We're just going to keep doing it this way. But what did he do? He didn't listen to that because what did he do? He cried out all the more. Every time the world tells you that you should be quiet about proclaiming Christ, what should you be doing? Crying out all the more. Because guess what? I know someone else now needs to hear it. When they try to discourage you, again, it goes back to the early church and the beautiful example that we could see. We should really do a lesson on like the early church. When they were persecuted, it was not a discouragement. They viewed it as an encouragement because of the great faith that their brothers and sisters had in that persecution. The same with us. If we face persecution or ridicule or whatever it may be, why are they persecuting us? Why do they hate us? Do they actually hate us or do they hate something else? They hate the Father. They hate who we're following. Why do they hate who we're following? Because the person we're following is the light of the world and it's shining light on the what? On the darkness. And so, of course, they're going to hate the light because the light is shining a bright light on their darkness in their life, and it's becoming more and more evident. So as they persecute, we need to be doing what? Crying out more and more. So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Don't you love this? Everyone's telling this guy, hey, pipe down, keep it down. Don't be asking that. Keep your voice down. And what does Jesus do? He stops. He always, it seems, goes against the grain, right? He stops and he commands him to be called to him. Then they call the blind man, saying to him, "Be of good cheer." I think he already was, wasn't he? Rise, he is calling you. So he calls him over, right? And then in verse 50, we're told, and throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. You notice he didn't wait when he was called? People in the world today sometimes can hear the message of Jesus, the salvation in Jesus, the truth in Jesus, the redemption in Jesus, all that. And sometimes the world's response is, all right, maybe next week. What if there's not a next week? I mean, you got to think about the blind man here. What happens if he didn't get up real quick? You think Jesus is going to stand there for forever and wait for you? Or is he asking you to come forward? He's asking you to come forward. Now, Jesus is still calling us every single day we have a chance, but eventually the calling is over. He's not just going to wait for eternity. We get to live in eternity. He's not going to wait for an eternity. And so when he calls, we need to be answering the call. And that goes for our salvation and accepting that salvation, but it also goes for us reaching out to lost souls and that calling that we have. We need to be answering that call. So Jesus, here in verse 51, so Jesus answered and said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" What are the questions that you could ask, or the answers that you could give if Jesus asked you this question? What would your, maybe this is a good random side note, what would your answer be to that? Jesus is here today. You're called to Jesus. He says, "What do you want me to do for you?" What do you think the world would say for that? Well, we would ask all kinds of different things. What would we ask? What would you ask? The blind man said to him, Rabbi, that I may receive my sight. Then Jesus said to him, Go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. Now, Jesus has made this exact same statement numerous times. Your faith has what? Has made you well. Now, he's healing people physically. Does our faith make us well today? It sure does. Our faith in Christ, our faith in a risen Savior, our faith knowing that we are going to inherit something greater, our faith knowing that our sins are going to be or are washed away by the blood of Christ, our faith knowing that we're going to become overcomers of this world, does that make us well? It ought to bring so much goodness and so much cheer, so much gladness to your heart. It ought to give you so much energy to continue the fight forward. It ought to give you so much hope as we continue to journey through this world, as we continue on to something greater. Your faith has made you well. Your faith can make you well tonight. Your faith in Christ can make you well tonight. Because I might be sick with some sinuses, Dale might be a little bit sick with some sinuses, but guess what? Your soul can still be well. I can be as sick as all get out on the outside. I can have the worst disease that this world can throw at me, and it can cripple me. It can take away all strength, all power. I could not be able to stand up, but my soul can still be clean. The world can persecute you, and the world can kill you, but your soul can still be clean. The world can take away your home. They can take away your money. They can take away everything that you have in life. They can't take away your salvation unless you allow them to. Christ has given you something so much greater than this, and your faith can make you well. And notice this, and after 7 days, he received his sight. Now, immediately, he received his sight. When you have the faith in Christ, and when you come forward and you follow his commandment, guess what? Immediately, you are made well. You don't have to go through some long cleansing process of several weeks and months and do all these different things. You are made well. You have something so much greater now waiting for you. You have a new hope. You have a new aspect on life. And then you can start to live the life that truly means something. A life that truly has substance to it. Because now you're living a life that is walking with Christ. And so as you look at this question, what do you want me to do for you? It's a question that all of us can sit there and think about tonight as we leave here. If Jesus asked you that question, what would be your response? In the ending, that should give us encouragement. Your faith can make you well. And I'm going to close on that. I'm going to give Dale 1 extra minute before I turn to him for our devotional. This is big time. 1 extra minute. I don't know how he's going to use it. He'll probably turn before I get over there. But I want to turn over to Dale for our devotional and then invitation, and then also over to Dale, I guess, for a song.
Oh, yeah. If you would mark in your songbooks, number 714. Number 714, Trust and Obey. We'll sing that after the Devo. Good to see you here tonight. It's a season of giving. We think about this time of the year when we gather together with family and with friends and think about trying to find that perfect gift to give to one another. And it's important for us to know the other person, right? Because if we're going to give them something, do they already have that? Do they need it? Do they want it? Is it something that's desired by them? And so there's a lot that goes into maybe our planning for the gifts that we buy and that we give to one another. And we may have someone that we shop for or somebody that we are trying to pick a gift out for, and they may be hard to buy for. They may be, because they have everything that they need or they have everything that they want. And it may be difficult for us to figure out what we ought to get them, right? And so knowing the recipient will help us to give the right kind of gift or the best kind of gift. Back in my earlier days when I was in college, I was dating a girl. It was before I met Paula, so it's not her. So she's off the hook.
But I was dating a girl, and we were shopping, and she didn't have a job, and she didn't have a car, but what she had was a debit card that was attached to her brother's account. Her brother had a job, and her brother had a car, and so she had this debit card that was attached to his account, and she was looking for a gift for him for his birthday, and so we went around to the malls and other places and did a lot of shopping, and she bought a gift, and she used his debit card to get the money to buy the gift. And I would encourage you, if you ever find yourself in that sort of situation, to not point out the obvious irony in that situation, because it's not going to go well if you do. Trust me. It's not going to go well if you point out, hey, you're buying him a gift, but you're using his money for it. Is that really a gift? But it's kind of like with us and God, isn't it? When we think about, what we give back to God, I mean, God has given us the perfect gift, right? Jesus is the perfect gift. Jacob's talking about that. I mean, this Life of Christ class, we've talked about this over and over again about how Jesus came down from heaven. He left the perfect place to come down here, and God gave us his best. You read in the book of Revelation, and John gets kind of depressed because there's a discussion going on about, well, who can open these seals, and who can take care of this? Who can take care of this problem? Who can take care of this issue? Who can defeat the enemy? And there's no one that can be found, but here's the Lamb that was slain, right? He's the one who's able to open those seals. He's the one who's able to get the job done. God gave us the gift of Jesus. He gave us the best. And so we think about, okay, what can we give back to him? But everything that we have, or almost everything that we have, already belongs to him, right? When we think about it, we're commanded to put something in the collection plate, right? He wants us to give because the church on earth who's going about and doing the work that Jesus has left for us to do. It takes money for missionary efforts and for spreading the gospel and for evangelism and for keeping the lights on the building. All those types of things require money. But when we put that money in the collection plate, does God really need our money? The church does, right? The effort here on earth does. But when we're given our money, we're giving him something that already belongs to him, aren't we? Doesn't it all already belong to him? And so we're kind of like that girl with the brother's debit card when we give money to God. We're giving him money that already belongs to him when we do that. But notice in Acts chapter 17, Paul's on Mars Hill and he's speaking to those Athenians in Acts chapter 17. In verses 24 and 25, he's explaining to them. Now, he doesn't start off by telling them about what happened with the law of Moses. He doesn't go through all the Jewish history because these are Gentiles, these are Greeks. They're not going to get all of that, right? So he starts talking about the God who made everything. He says, God who made the world and everything in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. They've got all these idols, right? They've got all these temples there in Athens. And that's where they go and they worship their idols. That's where they go and they worship their various deities. And he says, the God who made everything, he doesn't live in temples that are made with human hands. Nor is he worshipped with men's hands, he goes on to say, as though he needed anything. God doesn't need anything of a physical nature that we can give to him. He doesn't need a cat sweater, right? And he doesn't need an Ohio State Buckeye shirt. And he doesn't need the money because it's his already anyways. He doesn't need anything since he gives to all life and breath and all things. So everything that we have, right, belongs to him already. And he commands us to give, as I said, but what we give is already his anyways. Over in Psalm 50, verses 9 through 11, the psalmist here says, speaking for God, I will not take a bull from your house, nor goats out of your folds, for every beast of the forest is mine, right? Every beast of the forest. But anything that they were going to sacrifice, well, it already belonged to God, right? And if they had that as a mindset, well, this already belongs to God, so it's going to be easier for me to sacrifice this since it already belongs to him, than to say, well, no, I'm going to keep this one because it's the best, and I'm going to take the three-legged lamb, and I'm going to sacrifice that one to him. I'm going to take the cow that's got all the spots on it that I'm not going to breed, and I'm going to sacrifice that one to him. Every beast of the forest, he says, is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the mountains and the wild beasts of the field are mine. So it all belongs to him, right? So what do you get? What do you give back to God? What do you give to the one who has everything? Talk about someone who's going to be hard to buy for, right? you were going to the mall or you were going down to Walmart and you're trying to find something to give to God, right? That you're going to give as a gift. What would you give? He has everything, but there's one thing that he doesn't have. There's one thing that God doesn't have. There's one thing that doesn't automatically belong to him, and that's you. Because he isn't going to force you to follow him. He isn't going to force you to go into heaven kicking and screaming against your will. You are the one thing that you can give to God by our obedience, by our trust in him, that we can become a child of his, we can receive his word, and we can be obedient to it. He's not going to force us to do that. That's our choice. But no one else can give you to God except you. You've got to make that decision. You've got to make that choice to be one of his, because he's not going to force you. Notice over in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, Paul is talking here about those in Macedonia, and they were in deep poverty in Macedonia. And he says, even though they were in deep poverty, they were able to give beyond their means. Well, how is it that they were able to do that? I mean, if you're in deep poverty, and they didn't say, well, you're really poor folks, we're taking up this collection for the poor that are over here in Judea, but, because you're really poor, you don't have to contribute to this. It's like, oh, no, we're not, don't leave us out. We want to contribute. We want to be part of this. We want to contribute. And even in their deep poverty, they gave beyond their ability, he says. Notice in 2 Corinthians 8, beginning in verse 1, he says, moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. So they've done something so great here in Macedonia in their deep poverty that he's telling the church in Corinth about what these other folks have done. When in great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. So I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with much urgency that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And not only as we had hoped, but notice, how are they able to give beyond their means? They first gave themselves to the Lord, and then to us by the will of God. They first gave themselves to the Lord, and because they first gave themselves to the Lord, they were able to go above and beyond in serving him, being a child of his. In this season of giving, have you given God the only thing that he wants? The only thing that he doesn't already possess? The only thing that he doesn't already own? He's not going to force you to do it. He's not going to force you to come to him. He's not going to force you to go to heaven if that's not where you want to be. He's not going to force you to, he's not going to bring the Holy Spirit upon you and to guide you, and you have to choose him. You have to choose to want to be a child of God. You have to be transformed by the renewing of your mind that Paul talks about in Romans chapter 12. Right? Become a child of God. Give him the one thing that you possess that only you can give him. If you're here tonight and you're not a child of God, you haven't taken that step, you've not confessed him before men and been baptized for the forgiveness of your sins, we can help you with that. You can do that before you leave here. You don't have to leave here and not be a child of God. You can give yourself to him tonight. Maybe you've done that, but you've not been faithful to him, and you need the prayers of congregation. You need to maybe repent of something. You need to get it off of your chest and just come back to the fold of safety. You can do that too. If you have a need, won't you let it be known by coming to the front as we stand and as we sing?